Assalamu alaikum, Shabai. Good to see everybody, distinguished guests and colleagues. Yes, আমি সরাসরি প্রেজেন্টেশনে চলে যাই because we have a very packed day. Um, so and we want to hear from as many people as possible. Okay, I can see that you can see. So the presentation is going to be in English. The questions and answers we can do in Bangla. Okay. So I'm going to time myself. I have timed myself. I'll stick to 10 minutes. I'm going to talk about macroeconomic stability and economic recovery. Okay, so this is the prerequisite for everything else that we're going to talk about rest of today and tomorrow. Okay, if we don't have macroeconomic stability and if we fail to recover from the disruptions, not just of last year, but last few years under the fallen Hasina regime, if we don't recover from this, then none of the other things that we want to talk about are going to help. But at the same time, I want to make 2 points. One is that the legacy that the Hasina regime has left us and the instability that we had inherited, they will present any future government, any elected government with difficult policy trade-offs. So this is one point I want to highlight. And then the other point I want to highlight is that we need a new growth model. Okay, so simply stabilizing is not enough. Stabilizing and then having a cyclical recovery to go back to the way things were before the pandemic or 10 years ago is not going to be sufficient for the aspirations that we have as a nation. Aspirations that different political parties in their own language have expressed, whether it's $1 trillion economy, whether it's jobs, whether it's democratizing the economic infrastructure or the economy as such. None of these things are going to happen until we come up with a new growth model, which is what the rest of the sessions will be about. Okay, I'm going to present a few charts that show what the international institutions, the IMF, World Bank, ADB, what they are forecasting for the next 4 or 5 years. The point is not that these forecasts are correct. No forecast is ever correct. It's just that this is what their analysis is showing. And as I said, that's not sufficient for us. That's not going to get us to what we want, the kind of aspirations that we have since July. Okay. So first point, the first problem, the first issue is inflation. Okay. Election is coming, and I looked, I read, if you read our economic history, if you read our political history, going back to the elections back in 1930s when Sher Bangla Fazlul Haq was running for the first election in our history. Okay, he was running to become the Prime Minister of Bengal, and his campaign promise was, and I'm going to switch to Bangla here. His campaign promise was চাল ডাল তেল নুন দ্রব্যমূল্যের দ্রব্যমূল্য মানুষের ক্রয় ক্ষমতায় রাখতে হবে, ensure করবে. He did that back in 1937, and I see that we've got distinguished politicians in our midst. And I can tell you that, so if you ask them, they will say that, okay, no, this promise is going to be there in our manifesto as well. Okay, so inflation, keeping cost of living low, affordable, this is government's make or break in Bangladesh because of this. And we have a difficult challenge ahead of us in that if we look at the left-hand side is what has actually happened. We see that under Hasina, towards the end of Hasina regime, inflation went up. These are official figures. Reality, probably even worse. Okay, we're just sticking to official figures. So the international agencies are saying that yes, inflation will come down, but not immediately. Okay, and this basically means that the newly elected government will still have to confront if these forecasts are correct, then they will either have to confront a relatively high inflation, and it's going to take a while before inflation comes down, or that they would have to take other measures to help the central bank bring inflation down. So this is a difficult policy challenge, okay? And the central bank independence is a key part of meeting this challenge. Active market management, not regulation, but all supply management is something that the government could do to help mitigate this or help ease the pressure on the central bank. Okay, so basically things either you accept that inflation is going to take a while to come down and face the political consequence, or you have to take measures. Meanwhile, Hasina regime has left us with a fiscal burden, debt to GDP ratio. This is the black line, the historical. It had gone up by more than 10% of GDP in the last 7-8 years of the Hasina regime. And again, World Bank and the IMF, they are forecasting that this will continue to rise. IMF is forecasting that as much as a quarter of our revenue will have to be spent on paying interest, doing interest payments on the debt that has been left to us. Again, difficult, this constrains the elected government's ability to do things that they may want to do. They may want to be more equitable. They may want to spend more money on health or education or social safety net and so on. But you are left with this legacy. So either you have to raise revenue, or you have to manage your expenditures in other things better. You have to do something. We will, again, the international agencies, IMF particularly, is forecasting that domestic savings is falling, and that may constrain our ability to have an investment recovery, okay? And if we cannot finance our investment from domestic savings, then we would have to borrow externally, which would suggest, or their forecast is that the current account deficit is going to widen. Now, 2% of GDP current account deficit in itself is not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily scary. If we have credible institutions, if we have good quality investment, if we can manage the capital inflow, if we have functioning capital market, functioning financial sector, then this is not a problem at all. On the other hand, if we don't have those things, then there are many countries where even 1% of GDP current account deficit can trigger problems and crises. So again, the challenge is very clear that we need to make sure that our institutions are credible, our markets are functioning properly, so that we can avoid instability. And even if we did all of those things, so even if we brought inflation down, even if we had managed our capital flows properly, even if we made the difficult fiscal trade-offs, these agencies are not forecasting a swift recovery, okay? So for example, left-hand side, which is private investment growth came, it had been struggling since at least 2022, 2023, towards the end of Hasina regime. In 24, 25, it didn't grow at all. Now, this is not surprising given the political disruptions, given the uncertainty and so on. The question is about recovery. Okay, so the recovery path that the IMF and World Bank are projecting is that investment is going to grow, but it's going to grow by something like 8%, 9%. Okay, as a result of which GDP growth is going to recover to something like 6.5%. Okay, so on the one hand, 6.5% GDP growth is not bad. It's if we can maintain that, and this is what we had achieved back in the back 20 years ago, towards the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's not bad. Okay, if we can maintain that in a stable place, that would lift millions of people out of poverty and so on. But I would also argue that it's not enough given our aspirations. For example, if we aspire to be a $1 trillion economy by mid-2030s, if we aspire to be an equitable society, remember the political slogan of Boishomya Birodhi, if we aspire to those things, then this is not enough. We need to step up our game. And this is what we would like to hear from all the participants, that what are the new growth models that you have in mind, how you are going to achieve this, and this is the conversation we would like to have. Okay, I'll very quickly go through the next couple of slides because these are just some opportunities and challenges, okay? A challenge is that our productivity is very low. So whatever you need to do, whatever ideas that you might have, I would ask you to think about, will these boost our productivity in both industry and services sector? One issue that we often don't think about is that we have untapped labor resources, particularly when it comes to our female workforce. Okay, only about a third of our labor force is women, whereas in many East Asian countries it's close to half. So that means that there is a lot of untapped labor left in the country. That's something that we often don't think about. So that's something, challenges and opportunities. Liner shipping connectivity index, it's a measure of how connected our ports are to the world. And again, challenges and opportunities. We are not very well connected, but that also means that there's room to connect ourselves. And the last chart, so this is something that the World Bank has just released. And I found these maps fascinating. What this is showing is that over the between 2013 to 2025, so the last decade of the Awami League rule, Hasina regime, where the growth and jobs were. And it seems that there is a clear geographic distinction happening in Bangladesh, where the northeastern part of the country are better connected, where there had been more job creation, where there had been more economic activity, and so on. The other side of the country, not so much. Okay, so again, challenges and opportunities for all of you to think about. So, bringing it all back, to stabilize the country, stabilize the economy, the newly elected government will have difficult trade-offs. So that's my key takeaway point number one. And credible institutions there are vital. So you need to have credible meritocratic appointments in different economic positions, but also that you need to make sure that these institutions work and do what they're supposed to do. So this is vital, the difficult trade-offs. But the second point is that simply stabilizing and achieving the recovery back to sort of the old path is not enough if we want to achieve our aspirations. Whatever political slogans you put on it, July has changed us, and those aspirations need to be met. So that means that coming up with a new growth model to democratize the economy. Okay, 10 minutes. I think I'm sorry I went 3 minutes overboard, but I'll stop here.